The Cathari had watched the stars for centuries, mapping the silent paths of cosmic dust and distant suns with cold precision. Their empire stretched across dozens of star systems, held together by rigid codes of honor and an unshakable belief in their own superiority. They had encountered other species before, some primitive, some nearly their equal, but none had ever challenged their authority. That was why, when their deep-range sensors picked up a small, drifting object near the outer rim of their territory, they reacted with curiosity, not fear. The object was a human probe, launched decades earlier from a pale blue planet circling an unremarkable yellow star. It carried no weapons, only recordings of music, images of cities and forests, and greetings in dozens of Earth languages. To the Cathari, it was a puzzle wrapped in silence. Their scientists studied it for weeks, decoding its simple transmissions and marveling at its crude but earnest design. It spoke of a young species, loud, hopeful, and full of questions. The Cathari High Council debated what to do. Some argued for ignoring it, others wanted to destroy it as a potential threat. But Elder Vexler, one of the oldest and wisest among them, urged caution. "They are not ready," he said, his voice calm but firm. "They do not yet understand the dangers of the void. If we respond with force, they will learn only fear, and fear breeds war." After long discussion, the council agreed to send a message back along the probe's origin path. It was not a greeting. It was a warning. In clear universal symbols and translated audio, it said, "This region is under Cathari sovereignty. Do not approach. Do not send more vessels. Obey, and you will be left in peace." The message traveled across light years, carried by tight beam transmission toward Sol system. On Earth, it was received by a listening post in Nevada. The signal was strong, structured, and unmistakably artificial. Excitement rippled through the scientific community. First contact had happened, not with a handshake, but with a command. Linguists and xenocommunication experts worked around the clock to decode the full meaning. Most agreed it was a territorial notice, not a declaration of war. But not everyone saw it that way. Admiral Carl Vance, head of the United Interstellar Command, viewed it differently. To him, the message reeked of arrogance. "They're drawing a line in space and telling us we can't cross it," he told the Joint Defense Committee. "If we back down now, they'll think we're weak." And weakness invites invasion. Despite protests from civilian advisors and even some military officers, Vance pushed for a response, not with words but with presence. He ordered the UISC Resolute, a sleek frigate armed with plasma cannons and stealth shielding, to move toward the edge of Cathari-claimed space. Its mission: patrol the border, gather intel, and show that humanity would not be cowed by alien ultimatums. The Resolute launched within the week. Aboard it was Captain Lisa Monroe, a no-nonsense officer with sharp eyes and a reputation for cool judgment. She didn't like the order. She'd read the full translation of the Cathari message. It wasn't hostile, it was firm, yes, but it left room for dialogue. Still, she followed commands. Her crew trusted her and she wouldn't let them down. As the Resolute neared the designated zone, sensors picked up Cathari activity. A single patrol vessel, smaller than the Resolute but bristling with unknown tech, emerged from behind a dust cloud. It didn't attack. It simply hovered, watching. Lisa ordered her ship to hold position, engines idling, weapons powered down but ready. She opened a comms channel, broadcasting a loop of peaceful signals, mathematical sequences, star maps, and a recording of a child's voice saying hello in English. For 3 hours, nothing happened. Then, without warning, the Cathari ship fired a single energy pulse, not at the Resolute but into empty space just off its bow. A warning shot, standard procedure in many spacefaring cultures. But aboard the Resolute, the bridge crew panicked. The tactical officer shouted, "They're targeting us!" before Lisa could respond. In the confusion, someone, later identified as a nervous ensign named Danny Ruiz, triggered the ship's auto-defense protocol. The Resolute's forward cannons roared to life. Twin plasma bolts lanced across the void and struck the Cathari vessel amidships. The alien ship shuddered, its hull cracking open like an egg. Blue fire erupted from within, and within seconds it was gone, reduced to drifting wreckage and silent debris. Lisa froze. "Shut it down," she yelled. "All weapons offline. Broadcast surrender codes now." But it was too late. The damage was done. The Cathari patrol ship was destroyed, and with it any chance of peaceful first contact. Back on their homeworld, the Kethari High Council received the final transmission from their patrol. The footage showed the human ship firing without provocation. Outrage swept through the chamber. War drums echoed in the great halls. Only Vexilor remained silent. When finally he spoke, his voice was heavy with sorrow. "You were warned," he said, looking not at his fellow elders but at the stars beyond the council dome. "Do not attack the humans, they will hunt you forever. They do not fight to conquer. They fight to survive. And when they believe they have been wronged, they will not stop. Not in a year. Not in a century. They will follow you to the end of time." His words were dismissed as fear-mongering. The council voted unanimously. Humanity was now an enemy of the Kethari conquered. Retribution would be swift and absolute. On Earth, news of the skirmish was spun as a victory. The media hailed the Resolute's crew as heroes who stood firm against alien aggression. Admiral Vance gave a press conference declaring that humanity would never bow to tyranny from the stars. Few questioned the details. Fewer still knew that the first shot had been fired by human hands. Danny Ruiz, racked with guilt, tried to report what really happened. But his logs were classified. His testimony was buried under layers of military secrecy. He was reassigned to a remote outpost on Epsilon 9, a dusty mining colony on the edge of human space. He hoped to forget. He hoped the universe would forget too. But the Kethari did not forget, and they did not forgive. Months passed. Tensions simmered. Human colonies expanded. Kethari patrols grew more aggressive. Both sides armed themselves in silence, waiting for the spark that would ignite the war. That spark came on a quiet Tuesday morning, when sensors around Epsilon 9 detected a massive energy signature approaching at high speed. Before the colony's defense grid could power up, the sky turned white. Orbital bombardment rained down like judgment from the gods. Buildings melted. Atmosphere burned. Thousands died in minutes. Among the chaos, Danny Ruiz sprinted toward the emergency shuttle bay, his heart pounding. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to become the only witness to a massacre that would change the fate of two species. And far away, in the cold halls of the Kethari capital, Vexler closed his eyes and whispered, "Now they will come, and they will not stop." The attack on Epsilon 9 left nothing but ash and silence. The colony had been home to over 3,000 people, miners, engineers, teachers, children. Now it was a cratered ruin under a blood-red sky. Smoke curled from the wreckage of domes and landing pads, and the air smelled of melted metal and burnt plastic. Danny Ruiz stumbled through the ruins, his face streaked with soot, his hands shaking. He had made it to Shuttle Bay 3 just as the last blast hit. The shuttle's engines screamed to life as the ground behind him vanished in fire. He didn't look back. He couldn't. The small craft limped into orbit, its hull cracked and systems failing. Danny knew he wouldn't last long without help. He activated the emergency beacon and recorded a short message using the shuttle's damaged comms unit. He showed the burning planet below, the broken pieces of homes, and his own trembling face. "This was Epsilon 9, he said, voice raw. "They didn't warn us, they just erased us." Then he added the Kethari ship's silhouette from memory, a jagged, crescent-shaped vessel with glowing blue veins along its hull. He sent the file into the void and hoped someone would hear. 3 days later, the message reached Earth. It played on every news channel, every public screen, every personal device. People watched in horror as the young engineer described the end of a world. There were no soldiers in the footage, only families, schools, gardens turned to glass. The United Earth government held an emergency session. President Helen Grant, a quiet woman with steady eyes and a voice that carried weight, stood before the world and said, "We will not let this stand. We will defend our people, and we will answer this crime." But while governments moved slowly, ordinary people moved fast. On Mars, a retired freighter pilot named Rick Boyd gathered a group of ex-military and civilian volunteers in a dusty hangar outside New Shanghai. They had no uniforms, no official orders, just anger and a will to act. Rick had lost a cousin on Epsilon 9. He didn't wait for permission. He started fixing old ships, loading them with spare weapons and training crews in hit-and-run tactics. "If the Kethari think we're soft," he told his group, "they're about to learn different." Meanwhile, near the Jupiter shipyards, Captain Lisa Monroe stood on the bridge of the UISK Vanguard, her new command. She had been pulled from desk duty after the Resolute incident, blamed but not punished. Now, with war looming, they needed her again. She studied star charts, troop movements, and the few scraps of intel on Cathari fleet patterns. She knew the military would want a big, slow response. Carriers, battleships, formal engagements. But Lisa had seen what the Cathari could do. She also knew humans didn't fight like other species. They improvised. They adapted. They used what they had. She sent out quiet calls to old friends, freighter captains, asteroid miners, drone racers turned scouts. She asked for ships, for pilots, for anyone who could fly and fight. Within a week, a strange little fleet began forming near the outer moons of Saturn. It wasn't pretty. Some ships were patched with scrap metal. Others ran on jury-rigged power cells. But they were fast, quiet, and full of people who had nothing left to lose. Back on Earth, a teenager named Noah Patel sat in his bedroom in Houston, staring at the Epsilon 9 footage on loop. He was good with code, really good. While others mourned, he dug into the technical details of Danny's message. He noticed something odd, a faint signal buried in the background noise repeating every 12 seconds. It wasn't human. It was Cathari. He spent 2 sleepless nights decoding it. What he found chilled him. It was a navigation pulse, a homing beacon the Cathari ships used to sync their movements. If he could disrupt that signal, even for a few seconds, their fleet coordination would break down. He sent his findings to every military and civilian contact he could find. Most ignored him, but one didn't. Lisa Monroe read his message, tested his theory in a simulator, and saw it worked. She invited him aboard the Vanguard. At 16, Noah became the youngest tactical advisor in human history. As the weeks passed, the Cathari prepared for their next strike. They believed humanity would cower, beg for peace, or scatter. They did not expect what came next. Small human ships began appearing near Cathari supply routes, fast, silent, and deadly. They didn't try to win big battles. They cut supply lines, jammed comms, and vanished before the Cathari could respond. One raid destroyed a fuel depot near Proxima. Another disabled a scout vessel without firing a shot, just by flooding its systems with corrupted data. The Cathari admirals grew frustrated. Their reports spoke of ghost ships and unpredictable tactics. They couldn't understand how a species so young could fight like this. To them, war was about honor, formation, and clear lines of engagement. Humans had no lines. They fought from shadows, from asteroids, from inside their own wreckage. Danny Ruiz, rescued by a civilian salvage crew, was brought to Luna Medical. He was thin, haunted, but alive. When Lisa Monroe visited him, he handed her a data chip. "I recorded more than the message," he said. "I got sensor logs from the shuttle during the attack. Speed, weapon type, shield frequency, they're all here." Lisa took the chip. It was gold. With this, they could build better shields, better weapons, better plans. On Mars, Rick Boyd's militia launched their first real mission. They ambushed a Cathari scout near the asteroid belt, using old mining drones as decoys. The Cathari ship chased the drones into a trap. 3 hidden freighters opened fire from behind a nickel-iron rock. The alien vessel exploded in a flash of blue flame. No human lives were lost. It was a small victory, but it spread like wildfire across the networks. People began to believe they could win. President Grant, seeing the tide of public will, authorized full mobilization. Factories ran day and night. Schools turned into training centers. Even children learned basic survival drills. But the real change wasn't in the weapons, it was in the spirit. Humans weren't just defending. They were answering. Every lost colony, every stolen life became a reason to push harder, fly faster, fight smarter. The Cathari, still confident in their superiority, planned a major assault on the Ganymede shipyards, the heart of human fleet production. They sent a dreadnought, the largest class of warship they owned, escorted by 12 cruisers. They expected little resistance. What they didn't know was that Lisa Monroe had guessed their move. She had Noah's jamming code ready. Rick Boyd's militia was hiding in the Jovian storms, and Danny Ruiz's data had given them the exact moment the Cathari shields would cycle. As the alien armada approached Ganymede, the humans waited in silence. Then, at the perfect second, the jamming signal hit. The Cathari ships blinked offline for just 3 seconds, but that was all it took. Missiles streaked from hidden launchers. Drones swarmed like angry bees. The dreadnought's shields flickered and died. The battle that followed was chaos. But it was human chaos, and that made all the difference. Far away on the Cathari homeworld, Elder Vexilor watched the first reports of the Ganymede engagement. He saw human ships darting like insects, striking and vanishing. He saw Cathari vessels falling one by one, not to superior firepower, but to cleverness, to stubbornness, to rage wrapped in discipline. He turned to his aide and said softly, "They are not hunting us yet, but they are learning how." And in that moment he knew the war had already changed. It was no longer about territory or pride. It was about survival. And the humans, once seen as weak, were proving they would do anything to survive. The Cathari had always believed war was a matter of strength, order, and clear lines of command. Their fleets moved like clockwork, their tactics written in ancient doctrine, their victories measured in territory gained and enemies subdued. But humanity did not fight like that. They fought like a storm, unpredictable, relentless, and everywhere at once. After the failed strike on Ganymede, the Cathari admirals began to understand something unsettling. They were not facing an army. They were facing a whole species that refused to lose. Human tactics spread like wildfire across the frontier. Small groups of pilots, engineers, and even farmers turned their everyday tools into weapons. Old cargo haulers were fitted with missile racks. Mining lasers were reprogrammed to slice through alien hulls. Even communication satellites were hacked to broadcast false signals, luring Cathari patrols into ambushes. There was no single leader, no central plan, just thousands of people doing what they could, where they were, with what they had. Danny Ruiz, now recovered and reassigned to a mobile tech unit, traveled from colony to colony, teaching settlers how to build early warning sensors from spare parts. He showed them how to mask heat signatures using ice and reflective foil, how to fake ship signatures with old drones, how to hide entire towns in electromagnetic dead zones. "They expect us to be loud," he told a group of miners on Ceres, "so we stay quiet. They expect us to fight fair, so we don't." The miners nodded, already welding scrap metal into turret mounts. On Earth, schools began teaching children basic coding and radio operation, not for exams but for survival. In Chicago, a group of high school students built a network of rooftop signal boosters that could relay emergency alerts across 3 states in under 10 seconds. In Nairobi, engineers turned solar farms into power sources for hidden defense grids. Humanity wasn't just preparing for war, they were weaving it into daily life like thread in cloth. Noah Patel, still aboard the Vanguard, worked day and night refining his jamming algorithm. He discovered that Cathari ships reset their navigation pulses every 47 seconds during high-speed maneuvers. That tiny window became humanity's greatest weapon. Lisa Monroe used it to devastating effect. Her fleet would wait in asteroid fields or gas clouds, silent and dark. When a Cathari ship passed, Noah would trigger the jam. For those 47 seconds, the alien vessel was blind. That's when the humans struck. One such raid near Sirius 7 wiped out an entire Cathari supply convoy. The humans lost 2 ships, but the Cathari lost fuel, food, and weapons meant for a major offensive. Back on their homeworld, supply shortages began to bite. Rations were cut. Ship repairs delayed. Morale, once unshakable, started to crack. Meanwhile, Rick Boyd's militia grew into a full shadow navy. Operating from hidden bases in the Kuiper Belt, they hit Cathari outposts with surgical precision. They didn't hold ground. They didn't need to. They'd strike, vanish, and strike again somewhere else. Cathari commanders grew paranoid. They started seeing human traps in empty space. Patrols doubled, then tripled, slowing their advance to a crawl. The real turning point came not from a battle, but from a boy in a basement. In Denver, 12-year-old Leo Martinez loved tinkering with old radios. His father had been a comms officer on Epsilon 9. Leo kept his old headset as a keepsake. One night, while scanning dead frequencies, he picked up a faint repeating tone, Cathari command chatter leaking through a damaged relay. He didn't understand the words, but he recorded the pattern and sent it to a public science forum. Within hours, a linguist in Oslo matched it to known Cathari syntax. Within a day, Noah had a rough translation. The message was a routine status update, but it mentioned a secret rendezvous point near Proxima Centauri. Lisa Monroe didn't hesitate. She gathered every ship she could, freighters, scouts, even a retrofitted cruise liner, and set a course. They arrived before the Cathari did. They planted fusion mines along the expected approach vector, then hid inside a comet's icy tail. When the Cathari dreadnought arrived, flanked by 4 cruisers, it never saw the mines. The explosion tore through the formation like a hammer through glass. The dreadnought's core ruptured, spewing molten metal into space. 2 cruisers were vaporized instantly. The others fled, but not before human drones tagged their escape vectors. Hours later, Rick Boyd's crew intercepted them near Alpha Centauri and finished the job. News of the victory spread faster than light. For the first time, humans felt hope. Not just hope for survival, but hope for winning. The Ketheri High Council convened an emergency session. Reports poured in, supply lines cut, patrols ambushed, morale collapsing. Some elders demanded total war, orbital strikes on Earth itself. But others, younger ones who had studied human history, warned against it. They have no central capital, one argued. Destroy one city and 10 more rise in its place. Burn their fields and they grow food in labs. Kill their leaders and new ones speak from garages and basements. Elder Vexlor said nothing at first. Then he stood. You still do not see, he said. This is not a war of territory. It is a war of will. And their will is endless. They will not break. They will not bargain. They will only remember and answer. His words fell like stones in still water. Back on the Vanguard, Lisa reviewed the latest intel. The Kethari were regrouping near the Helios Drift, a dense asteroid field rich in rare metals. It was perfect for an ambush. She called Rick, Noah, and Danny into the war room. This is where we end it, she said. Not with a treaty, not with luck, with proof that they cannot win. They spent weeks preparing. Noah designed a new jamming pulse that would last 72 seconds. Danny rigged old mining charges to mimic human ship signatures. Rick gathered every volunteer ship within 3 systems. They trained in silence, moving like ghosts through the dark. The plan was simple: lure the Kethari flagship into the drift with fake distress calls. Let them think they were chasing a broken human fleet. Once inside, trigger the jam, activate the mines, and swarm them from all sides. It was risky. If it failed, the core of human resistance would be destroyed. But Lisa knew something the Kethari didn't. Humans didn't need a single fleet to win. They just needed one victory to prove they could fight back. As the Vanguard led the decoy group toward Helios Drift, Lisa looked out at the stars. She thought of Epsilon 9, of Danny's haunted eyes, of children learning to code instead of play. She thought of the warning no one had listened to. Now the Ketheri would learn it the hard way, and humanity would make sure they never forgot. The Helios Drift was a graveyard of rock and ice, a swirling maze of asteroids left over from the birth of the star system. It was quiet, dark, and perfect for an ambush. Lisa Monroe guided the Vanguard and its small group of decoy ships deep into the field, moving slow, engines barely humming. Behind her, hidden in the shadows of larger rocks, waited Rick Boyd's fleet, freighters, salvaged warships, even a few retrofitted passenger liners all loaded with weapons and hope. The Kethari took the bait. Their flagship, the Iron Maw, a vessel twice the size of the Vanguard, entered the drift with 4 escort cruisers. They moved with confidence, scanning for the broken human ships they believed were fleeing. What they didn't see were the hundreds of fusion mines Danny Ruiz had planted along the inner corridors of the field, disguised as space debris. They didn't hear the countdown ticking in Noah Patel's hands. When the Iron Maw reached the center of the trap, Noah sent the signal. The jamming pulse hit like a wave. For 72 seconds, the Kethari ships went blind. Sensors scrambled, comms dead, targeting systems frozen. In that silence, Lisa gave the order. Light them up. Mines detonated in a chain reaction, blue-white fire blooming between the asteroids. The shockwave ripped through the Kethari formation. One cruiser vanished instantly. Another spun out of control, its engines torn off. The Iron Maw's shields flared and collapsed under the pressure. Before the Kethari could recover, human ships poured from hiding. Missiles streaked through the dark. Railgun rounds punched through weakened hulls. Drones swarmed like angry hornets, frying external systems with EMP bursts. The battle lasted less than 20 minutes. When it was over, the Iron Maw lay broken, half buried in a cloud of its own wreckage. 2 cruisers were gone. The other 2 fled, damaged and disoriented. Human losses were light, 2 small scouts, their crews evacuated in time. It was the first true victory of the war, and it echoed across every human colony, every listening post, every hidden outpost. But Lisa didn't celebrate. She knew this wasn't enough to end the war, only to change its shape. While medics treated the wounded and engineers patched hulls, she sent a new order. Broadcast the Cathari Elders' original warning. Not as a threat but as truth, using captured comms gear from the Iron Maw, Noah reassembled the full message Vexler had sent long ago. Then, with Rick's help, they beamed it on every Cathari frequency they could find, repeating it over and over like a ghost in the static. Do not attack the humans. They will hunt you forever. The message reached Cathari patrols, command posts, even civilian vessels. At first it was dismissed as human trickery, but then officers began to listen. Younger Cathari, those who had never seen Earth but had watched their comrades die in pointless skirmishes, started asking questions. Why were they fighting a species that only defended itself? Why had they ignored the Elders' warning? Whispers of doubt spread through the ranks. On the Cathari homeworld, the High Council erupted in chaos. Some demanded immediate retaliation, burn every human world to ash. Others argued that the war was unwinnable. They do not fight like us, one commander said. They do not need fleets. They turn dust into weapons. They make children into soldiers. How do you defeat a people who refuse to fall? Elder Vexler was summoned once more. He stood before the council not as a voice of fear, but as a voice of memory. I warned you, he said. Not because I feared them, but because I understood them. They are not cruel. They are not conquerors. But they remember. And when they believe justice is owed, they will not rest until it is paid in full. His words struck deeper this time. The loss at Helios Drift had shaken the Cathari faith in their own invincibility. For the first time, they saw humanity not as pests, but as something else. Something relentless. Back on Earth, President Helen Grant watched the battle footage with quiet pride. She knew the victory gave her leverage. She called an emergency session with the United Earth Assembly and proposed a bold move. Offer peace, but on human terms. No apologies. No surrender. Only justice. She demanded the Cathari hand over the commanders who ordered the Epsilon 9 massacre and opened their borders to joint patrols. It was not a plea. It was a test. The message was sent through neutral channels. Days passed with no reply. Then a single Cathari vessel appeared near Titan. Not armed, not aggressive. It broadcast a request for talks. Lisa Monroe was chosen to represent humanity, along with Danny Ruiz, whose testimony carried the weight of loss. They met the Cathari delegates aboard a neutral science station orbiting Saturn's largest moon. The Cathari team was led by a young officer named Jar-El, one of the few who had questioned the war from the start. She looked tired, her armor scuffed, her eyes heavy with the cost of conflict. Lisa spoke plainly. She showed her the ruins of Epsilon 9, the faces of the dead, the recordings of children who never got to grow up. She did not shout. She did not threaten. She simply said, "This is why we fight. Not for land. Not for power. For this." Jar-El listened. Then she played a recording of her own, a message from Elder Vexler sent in secret. "Tell them we hear their pain," he said, "and tell them we were fools." Talks began in earnest. Not easy, not quick, but real. Both sides laid out terms. The Cathari agreed to stand down their fleets. They promised to investigate the Epsilon 9 attack and hold those responsible accountable. In return, humans would stop raids and share basic scientific data, clean energy, medical tech, navigation safety protocols. It was not forgiveness. It was understanding. As the first draft of the treaty took shape, Lisa stood by a viewport, watching a human freighter dock nearby. Its hull was patched with mismatched metal, its engines patched with wire and hope. On the other side, a Cathari shuttle eased in, its blue lights dimming in a gesture of peace. Workers from both species waved not as enemies, but as neighbors learning to share the same sky. Far away, on the Cathari homeworld, Vexler watched the live feed from Titan. He saw humans and Cathari standing side by side, not with weapons but with data pads and shared maps. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Now they see, now they know." The war was not over. But the hunting was, and that, he knew, was the first step toward something new. The peace talks on the Titan station lasted 17 days. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic signings under flashing lights. Just long hours in a quiet room with metal walls and recycled air. Lisa Monroe sat across from Jar-El, the Cathari officer, and they spoke slowly, carefully. using translators that sometimes stumbled over tone more than words. Danny Ruiz was there too, not as a soldier but as a witness. He showed photos of Epsilon 9 before and after. He played the last message his neighbor had sent, a woman named Mara, singing a lullaby to her baby as the sky turned red. Jarl listened without moving. When it ended, she placed her three-fingered hand flat on the table and said, "This should not have happened." That simple sentence meant more than any treaty clause. It was the first time a Ketheri had admitted fault. From there, the rest came easier. The Ketheri agreed to hand over the three commanders who had ordered the strike on Epsilon 9. They would face a joint tribunal, judged by both human and Ketheri law. They also agreed to open 3 border zones for shared patrols, scientific exchange, and emergency aid. In return, humanity promised to stop all offensive operations and share basic medical and energy technology. Nothing that could be weaponized, but enough to build trust. The final agreement was signed on a cold morning Earth time. Lisa used a simple pen. Jarell pressed her palm to a glowing pad. No fanfare, no crowds. Just 2 people, tired but hopeful, ending a war that never should have started. News of the treaty spread fast. On Earth, people didn't cheer. They stood quiet for a moment, then went back to work, rebuilding, healing, remembering. In schools, teachers showed the footage of the signing not as a victory but as a lesson. "This is what happens," they said, "when we listen instead of shoot." Back on the frontier, Rick Boyd stood on the deck of his old freighter, watching a Kethari supply ship dock at a newly built joint station near Ceres. The alien vessel lowered its ramp, and a small group of Kethari engineers stepped out, carrying toolkits and data slates. Rick walked over, offered a handshake. The lead engineer hesitated, then mimicked the gesture, gripping Rick's hand with surprising firmness. They didn't speak the same language, but they both knew how to fix a broken reactor. That was enough. Noah Patel returned to Earth, not as a hero, but as a student again. He enrolled in university, this time studying xenolinguistics. He wanted to understand not just how aliens spoke, but why. He believed that if humans had truly listened to the first Kethari message, not as a threat but as a warning, the war might have been avoided. He made it his life's work to ensure that mistake was never repeated. Danny Ruiz chose a different path. He moved to a small colony on Titan itself, near the station where the treaty was signed. He helped design early warning systems that worked for both species, systems that didn't just detect ships but intent. He taught Kethari technicians how humans use simple tools to solve big problems. In return, they showed him how their ships healed small hull breaches with living metal. It was strange, beautiful, and full of promise. Months passed. The joint patrols began. Human and Kethari ships flew side by side along the border, scanning for pirates, rogue asteroids, or distress signals. At first, they kept their distance. Then, during a solar flare that knocked out comms, a Kethari cruiser shared power with a human scout ship. After that, crews started exchanging small gifts. Kethari crystal seeds that glowed in the dark, human coffee beans wrapped in foil. No one called it friendship, but it was the start of something like it. Elder Vexler never left his homeworld, but he watched everything. He received daily reports from Jarell, who now served as the Kethari ambassador to human space. He saw footage of children from both species playing in zero-gravity parks on the Titan station, laughing in a mix of sounds and gestures that needed no translation. He saw engineers solving problems together, pilots sharing flight logs, doctors comparing notes on alien biology. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the capital city, Vexler stood on his balcony and spoke to no one in particular. "They do not conquer," he said softly. "They endure, and in enduring they become unstoppable." He was right. Humanity had not won through strength alone. They had won because they refused to disappear, because they turned grief into grit, fear into focus, and loss into a reason to keep going. The Ketheri had learned the hard way that humans were not like other species. They did not forget. They did not forgive easily. But once they believed peace was possible, they worked for it with the same stubborn will they used to fight. Years later, a new deep space probe was launched from Earth. This one carried no weapons, no warnings. It held recordings of human and Kethari music, images of shared cities, and a simple message in dozens of languages. "We are learning to share the stars." As the probe vanished into the dark, a Kethari observation post tracked its path. Instead of sending a warning, they sent a signal of their own, a pulse of light. Shaped like a handshake somewhere in the void, the two messages traveled together side by side, toward whatever waited beyond. And for the first time in a long time, the galaxy felt a little less lonely.